When your avoidant partner sees you move on. When an avoidant partner sees you moving on, the reaction inside them is far more complex than what you might think. On the surface, avoidants often appear cold, detached, and unaffected by your absence. They may even give off the impression that they're relieved, that they never needed you in the first place. But the truth is, beneath that mask of indifference, a storm brews. Avoidants are wired to avoid emotional intensity, but they're not immune to it. And when they see you moving on, really moving on, it triggers something deep in them that they can no longer deny. The first thing an avoidant feels when they see you moving on is a loss of control. For much of the relationship, whether consciously or not, they relied on the idea that you would always be there, waiting for them to come back after their periods of withdrawal. It's part of the push-pull cycle they live in. They pull away, you chase, they retreat further, you hold on tighter. But when that cycle breaks, when you no longer chase and instead choose to focus on yourself, they are forced to face reality. They no longer control the narrative. That loss of control is both terrifying and awakening. Next comes the clash between ego and heart. Avoidants often have fragile egos hidden beneath layers of independence. They pride themselves on being self-sufficient, on not needing anyone. But when they see you smiling with someone else or thriving without them, their ego feels crushed. It sends a signal they can't ignore. They weren't indispensable in your life. And while their pride tells them to shrug it off, their heart knows otherwise. Deep down, they realize they did care, maybe more than they admitted even to themselves. That contradiction creates inner conflict, and it often shows up as sudden anger, jealousy, or even a silent retreat into themselves. Another powerful shift happens when they see you glowing in your independence. Avoidants secretly admire strength, but they're afraid of intimacy with strong partners because it means vulnerability. Yet when you move on, when you reclaim your energy, your hobbies, your peace of mind, they see the version of you they always wanted but never thought they deserved. And that realization cuts deep. It forces them to look at the fact that they pushed away someone who was not only valuable, but rare. But here's something important. When an avoidant sees you move on, it doesn't always lead to them chasing you back. Sometimes it awakens regret, but pride keeps them silent. Sometimes they tell themselves stories to numb the pain. They were never right for me anyway, or I'm better off alone. Avoidants often use these narratives to protect themselves from the vulnerability of admitting they lost someone they truly cared about. But even behind those rationalizations, the seed of loss remains. It lingers. It gnaws at them when they least expect it, late at night, in quiet moments, or when they stumble across something that reminds them of you. What really shakes them is when you don't just move on to another person, but when you move on to a higher version of yourself. When they see you leveling up, happier, healthier, more confident, they're forced to reflect on the fact that your growth came after leaving them. For someone who feared intimacy, it's a haunting thought that the very closeness they avoided was the thing that could have helped them grow too. And instead of embracing it, they ran. That realization can stick with them for years, sometimes even decades. Yet there's another layer most people don't see. When an avoidant sees you move on, it sometimes awakens their dormant attachment. Avoidants love in silence, often more than they admit. But love to them is scary, so they bury it under distance. When you move on, those buried feelings resurface. They may not chase you right away, but suddenly they're reminded of all the moments you shared, the laughter, the comfort, the small ways you made them feel safe. And here's the paradox. The very thing they were afraid to lose, their independence, now feels empty without you. So what happens next? For some avoidants, seeing you move on triggers a desperate attempt to come back. They might send a casual text, "Hey, how have you been?" Or they might test the waters with indirect gestures, watching your social media, trying to see if you still care. They won't always come with full vulnerability. That's too risky for them. Instead, they approach like a shadow, hoping you'll open the door again. But here's the key. This return isn't always about love. It's about soothing their own discomfort at seeing you move on. You must know the difference between genuine desire to reconnect and a temporary fear of loss. For some, the reaction is silence. They may never reach out. Not because they don't feel, but because admitting they want you back collides with their deepest fear. Intimacy. To an avoidant, vulnerability feels like danger. So instead of risking rejection, they convince themselves it's safer to stay silent, to pretend they don't care. But here's the truth. Even while they say nothing, they often replay your memories in their minds. They'd rather lose you entirely than expose the part of themselves that still needs you. And that's the great tragedy of avoidance. By the time they realize the value of love, the door has already closed. But here's where it gets fascinating. Moving on isn't just a reaction to them. It's a mirror, a test of their growth. If your moving forward only sparks jealousy or anger, it means they're still trapped, still circling the same old cycle of avoidance. But if it stirs something deeper, if it forces them into self-reflection, if they finally see how their fear drove you away, that moment can change everything. Sometimes losing someone they truly cared about is the shock that wakes them up, pushing them toward therapy, toward growth, toward finally confronting the very walls they once hid behind. In a strange way, your moving on becomes the one thing they can't avoid. But let's bring this back to you, because this isn't really about them. Moving on is not about revenge. It's not about flaunting your freedom or trying to make them jealous. It's about reclaiming your worth. It's about proving to yourself that you are not chained to their push-pull cycle, that you don't have to sit in limbo waiting for them to finally choose you. And here's the irony. When you finally choose yourself, that's often the exact moment an avoidant starts to respect you, even desire you, in a way they never did before. Because avoidants don't commit to desperation, they commit to strength. So when your avoidant partner sees you moving on, understand this. Beneath that calm, detached mask, a ripple has been created. They may not show it, they may never admit it, but inside, your decision to walk forward forces them to face a truth they cannot escape. You mattered. You always did. And losing you was never freedom. It was loss. That loss lingers with them, echoing in quiet moments long after you're gone. They may find ways to distract themselves, but deep down, they will remember. And in their memory, you'll always remain the one they pushed away, but could never truly forget. And that's the hidden power of moving on. It's not about making them chase. It's about making yourself free. Free to love again, free to grow, free to step into the life you deserve. And in that freedom, one of two things happens. Either your strength becomes the catalyst that finally inspires them to grow, or you walk away knowing you gave them something they'll never find again. Either way, you don't lose. Either way, you win.